Hello, my name is Sarah Minnis, and I serve as the team support for the governance network of the Rural Policy Learning Commons, also known as the RPLC. The governance network is lucky to have the first ever RPLC Policy Fellow. The Policy Fellow position was designed to recognize policy actors that are making substantial contributions to rural policy in whatever jurisdiction they may be working in. This initiative facilitates the engagement of public policy actors within the RPLC network and among RPLC activities. I am here today with our Policy Fellow, Patrick Leveque, who is our very first Policy Fellow for the Governance Network. So Patrick, to get started, what is your current position and how does it relate to rural governance?
Okay, I'm currently the Chief of Staff in the Office of the Third Party at the Legislative Assembly of Prince Edward Island. So I work for the elected members of the Green Party in this province. That on the surface doesn't sound like it's closely related to rural governance, but as part of my role, I'm responsible for providing critical analysis of government legislation and policies, developing policy alternatives and proposals, and then also in implementing citizen engagement activities for the elected members of my caucus. And PEI by its nature is very rural by Canadian standards. About half the population lives in rural communities. So anytime we're discussing anything to do with policy or engagement, if there's any expectation that it'll be at all successful, it has to be done through a rural lens in this province. Mm-hmm. So hence, all my activities are, to some extent, have to be done with rural communities in mind. And also the first, the elected member I was initially working with represents a rural riding. So we've had a particular interest in governance issues facing his constituents, things like municipal reform, water, resource management, issues like that have come up quite substantially in his district.
Wow, sounds like you're making a big difference for the lives of rural people in PEI. So what makes you excited about rural policy?
That's something I had to think about for a bit because, I mean, I grew up in an urban center. I now live in a rural community, but I guess going back when I was growing up in Newfoundland, it was at the time when the cod fishery had just collapsed, and it was a period of kind of accelerated decline for rural communities, the communities that depended on the fishery, and the effects of that were felt right across the province, even in the urban area where I grew up. I think too few people realize how important rural communities are to the collective well-being of everyone, including those in urban centers. In most jurisdictions, we see government policies that very much favor urban communities, whether that's in regard to governance or economic development, education, health care, whatever. So that's often to the detriment of rural communities. And I really believe that if we can rebalance government policies and priorities in a way that recognizes the interdependence of rural and urban places, then I think we'll be able to achieve better well-being and more sustainable development, and being able to tackle the big, as we call it in public administration, the wicked problems of our society.
Absolutely, and you kind of touched on this, but why should Canadians care about rural?
Well, I think it comes down to, I mean, Canada has an economy that's fairly dependent on natural resources, or at least historically was. And most of those resources, whether you think of the kind of typical things like forestry, mining, fisheries in coastal areas, those are all activities that are largely done in rural areas. And without rural communities to support those industries, that would significantly affect the economy of Canada as a whole. And there's some new emerging industries like renewable energy is also one that'll be really important for the not only economic well-being, but the environmental and to some extent social well-being of all Canadians. And that's, I mean, you look at your windmills and hydroelectric, you never see that in urban areas. It's in rural communities that we have those resources.
Good point. So switching back to the governance network specifically, why did you choose to apply to the RPLC's Governance Network's Policy Fellow position?
For me, it was mainly a way to stay connected to a wider network of people working on rural policy and rural issues, and also an opportunity to learn from those people and to attend conferences, things like that. I had a background in rural development before getting into government, and I found myself kind of drifting away from it. So this was a way to get back in and stay in touch with those people.
Great. So what are some of the activities you have been involved with as the Policy Fellow?
I guess one of the main things, or more recurring activities, has been regular meetings with, in particular, the team lead, and that's been useful for staying connected, but also just exploring different ideas with someone who's an expert in this area. And I think we've been able to influence each other's work with that. I had the opportunity to, at one point, call on the collective wisdom of the network to mobilize knowledge, I guess, is the terminology we would use, and help engage and inform the leadership of newly created Provincial Department of Rural and Regional Development in this province. I've also served on some selection committees for distributing grants and conference funding and literature reviews, things like that. And I guess just in general, I've helped promote the network and recruit new members.
Excellent. And you have your very own literature review topic that you're currently seeking a student for, I hear, as well.
Yes.
Never stops. So what advice would you give the next Policy Fellow?
I had to think about this one for a little bit. I think the first thing I would highly recommend anyone to attend the CERF conference, the Canadian Rural Revitalization Foundation. It's a great way to meet with a lot of other people in the network who tend to also attend that conference, and other practitioners, academics, policymakers from across the country interested in rural issues. I use part of the funding for the Policy Fellow position to help me attend that conference, so that was useful. Other than that, I would say just use the opportunity to connect with RPLC members, and if you can attend other conferences with either with the funding or with your own funding, where you can meet up with other RPLC members. It's a great opportunity to learn more and do some good networking.
Wow. Well, you have certainly been a wonderful first Policy Fellow. There's been, I know, some beginnings of trial and errors and as what comes with the new position, but you've done so well, and we're so happy to have you, and you certainly provided a great model for those going forward. So thank you for all that you have done, and we will certainly be missing you come April 1st, but we're excited for the transition and to have you still on the governance network. And
I'll still be around. I'm not going anywhere.
Fabulous. But the transition to the next Policy Fellow will be hopefully as smooth as the beginning of you as our Policy Fellow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Have a great day.
You too.